What's up everyone, Darcblade here with another Hunter's Guide to Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. In this video, we're going to be bringing you an endgame build, this time for the dual blades. Now what is an endgame build? Well, it's a build that is constructed from some of the rarest armor, weaponry and jewels in the game. They do feature talismans and Qurios crafting, but it's not to the extent where it's unobtainable. Now as always, if you find these videos helpful, informative or entertaining, please consider leaving a like on the video as well as subscribing to the channel, as I try to bring you a variety of builds for a variety of different playstyles and different games. Now when it comes to the dual blades, they are a very high mobility weapon. They are able to perform long combos, and whilst the individual hits of the dual blades aren't anything special, these long combos allow the weapons to deal a lot of damage. They also have great maneuverability as well, but this costs stamina. On top of that as well, with Monster Hunter Rise and Sunbreak, they have the ability to take to the skies quite often, allowing them to often perform their airborne attacks. And that is what I'm going to be focusing on with this endgame build. So I present to you the Airborne dual blade build. This is a build all about taking to the skies in relative safety. One of the issues when it comes to performing Demon Flight and the other airborne attacks with the dual blades is that you can often get hit out of the skies. With certain skills we have on this build, this will reduce the damage should we get hit out the skies or ignore it completely. So for this build you'll need the Flaming Espinasse Brain, the Golden Loon Mail, the Flaming Espinasse Grips, the Onmyo Ateobi and the Flaming Espinasse Heels. For your Petalace, this is down to personal preference. Go for the Demon Petalace if you want extra damage, Absolute Petalace if you want extra health. As for your Talisman, you want to get a Talisman that has the ability to get agitated to level 2 as well as a point in weakness exploit, whether this is through the skills actually being on the Talisman itself or through the decoration slots. When it comes to the weapon, well, at its core, this is an elemental build, as well as it being a quality of life build for the dual blades, so it can get away with using any element in the game. For the demonstration of this video, I'm using the Oppressor's Miracle, which are the Zenoga dual blades. These represent the thunder element. But the Narwhal dual blades are also a good option for the thunder element. The Mud Shredders, which is the Almudron dual blades, are a good option if you want to go for water. The Magma Shredders, the Magma Almudron dual blades are good if you want to go for fire. The Daora's Ventus, which is the Kushala Daora dual blades, are good if you want to go for ice. And the Crimson Twin Wings, the Valstrax dual blades, are good if you want to go for the dragon element. As for the Qurios crafting on the weapons, I'd recommend first going for a Rampage slot upgrade so it can get to tier 3, and then it's down to personal choice. I've gone for a increase to our elemental rating. As for the actual Rampage skill and decoration, I've gone for the Daora's Soul, which when we continuously land attacks on a monster will allow us to increase our base affinity. You can use Elemental Bane if you want to instead, if you're going against monsters who are severely weak to the elements, as in they have an elemental weakness rating of 25 or above. Now as for the decorations, you've got a fair few to play around with, and some of them are optional. So first of all I've gone for Jumping Jaws, an optional one to give us a point in Evade Extender, then gone for Tenderizer Jaws to max out Weakness Exploit, Cornerstone Jaws to max out Defiance, a Hard Bolt and Normal Bolt Jaws to max out the Thunder attack with this build. Remember, if you were using a different weapon with a different element, you'd replace these Bolt Jaws to match whatever new element you were using. Then gone for Critical Jaws to max out Crit Boost, Wirebug Jaws to max out Wirebug Whisperer, Critical Element Jaws to max out Crit Element, and then finally Steadfast Jaws to max out Stun Resistance. This is an optional one though. So if you've done what I've done here, you have a build with a raw attack of 362 with a thunder rating of 76. You'll have a small amount of purple sharpness with 0% base affinity, but this can be at least 50% when you take into account weakness exploit. It can even be higher, up to 70% when you take into account agitator as well. And you'll have a strong defense of 734, which is strong against fire and ice, but unfortunately weak to the other elements. As for the switch skills, now this is an airborne build, so Demon Flight is strongly recommended for this build, although you can get away without using it if you don't want to. When it comes to the dual blades as well, I also like to have the Spiral Slash on one loadout scroll and Piercing Bind on the other, as well as the Iron Shine Silk on one, whilst Shrouded Vault is on the other. So when it comes to the skills, first of all you'll have Agitator at level 5. Agitator is a skill that kicks in whenever a monster becomes enraged. When this happens, it will grant us bonus raw attack and bonus base affinity. You'll also have Thunder attack at level 5. This will increase the thunder rating and thus the thunder damage of this build. Remember, if you were using a different weapon with a different element, thunder attack will be replaced with whatever new element you were using. You'll then have Defiance at level 5, which is a skill that again kicks in when a monster becomes enraged. When this happens, we'll gain bonus defense and gain immunity to monster roars, tremors and wind pressure. You'll then have Attack Boost at level 4. Attack Boost is a skill that again increases the raw damage of a build and at level 4 or above grants us a percentage bonus to that raw attack. You'll then have Critical Boost at level 3. increasing the damage of our attacks should they crit a monster, but only applies to the raw portion of an attack, not the elemental portion. You'll then have Weakness Exploit at level 3. Weakness Exploit is a skill that grants us bonus affinity whenever we're attacking monster weak points. This can be up to 50%. You'll then have Critical Element at level 3. Critical Element is like Critical Boost, but applies to the elemental portion of an attack, not the raw damage or ailment portion. You'll then have Razor Sharp at level 3, which is a skill that prevents sharpness loss 50% of the time when we attack a monster. This, combined with the switch skill Iron Shine Silk, are how we're able to maintain our sharpness with the dual blades. You'll then have Spare Shot at level 3, which is a byproduct of the armor we're using. Spare Shot is not needed on a dual blade build whatsoever, it's a gunner skill. You'll then have Divine Blessing at level 3, which gives us a chance at taking reduced damage should we take a hit by a monster. This is a skill that we'll rely on, especially when Intrepid Heart isn't in effect. You'll then have Stun Resistance at level 3, preventing all stun effects on our hunter. You'll then have Wirebug Whisperer at level 3, which reduces the cooldown when it comes to our wirebugs, as well as how long we can hold additional wirebugs. You'll then have Burst at level 3. Burst is a skill formerly known as Chain Crit, which when we continuously land hits on a monster, it will grant us temporary increases to both our raw attack and elemental attack. You'll then have Counter Strike at level 2, which is a byproduct of the armor, but after we get knocked back from a monster, we'll gain increased raw attack. You'll then have Spirit Bird Call at level 1, which unfortunately on this build is actually level 2 thanks to the Qurios crafting, but nonetheless Spirit Bird Call is a useful skill, especially if you're not playing on the PC version of the game and you can have mods, as Spirit Bird Call allows Spirit Birds to come to your location at fixed intervals rather than you have to go out of your way to look for them. So it's a nice quality of life skill. You then have Intrepid Heart at level 2, which is one of the main skills for this build, which Intrepid Heart puts a blue gauge above our health bar. This will fill up as we continuously land hits on a monster. When it's full, should we take a hit that would knock us back, Intrepid Heart will instead protect us, reducing the damage taken and negating any damage reaction, so it removes any knockback. At level 2 as well, it also detonates an explosion on our hunter, dealing damage to the monster. This means that with Intrepid Heart, you're prevented from being knocked out of the skies when you're performing Demon Flight and your aerial attacks. So this, combined with Divine Blessing and Stun Resistance, are our main skills to keep us alive when we're performing our airborne attacks and we cannot actually manually dodge out of the way of an attack whilst we're in the skies. Anyway, you'll then have Evade Extender at level 1, which is an optional skill, a result of the Jumping Jaw, that extends and increases the distance at which we dodge and evade. You'll then have Blast Resistance at level 1, which is a result of the Qurios crafting, that grants protection against Blast Blight. Basically, at level 1 it delays the Blast Blight ailment as well as reduce the actual blast damage. You'll then have Adrenaline Rush at level 1, which is a useful skill, as when you perform a perfectly timed evade, just as the monster attacks you, you'll gain an increase to your raw attack. It would have been nice to get this higher, but at level 1 it's still quite efficient. And then finally you'll have Embolden at level 1. This reduces the amount of time and damage it takes for a monster to become enraged. But when a monster does become enraged, Embolden will kick in, granting us bonus defense, as well as more invisibility frames when it comes to dodging. So there we have it, those are all the main and essential skills for this build. As you can see, it still has DPS options on top of that quality of life when it comes to becoming airborne. But let's quickly move on to talk about the Qurios crafting. Now, like I've said before, these builds are endgame builds, so they do feature Qurios crafting. However, it's not to the extent where all the pieces of armor feature attack boost, crit boost, skills that are considered the rarest in the game. Most of the time I'll simply go for additional decoration slots or slot upgrades rather than go for the skills themselves, as it allows for more customization with our builds. So for the Flaming Espinasse Brain, I've got an additional tier 1 decoration slot. For the Golden Loon Mail, I've got an additional tier 1 decoration slot, a tier 4 slot upgrade, and a point in the blast resistance skill. For the Flaming Espinasse Grip, I've got a point in the Spirit Bird Core skill, as well as another additional tier 1 decoration slot. For the Omnio Ateobi, I've got a point in the Burst skill, which is considered probably one of the rarest when it comes to this set of Qurios crafting. And then finally for the Flaming Espinasse Heal, I've got a tier 2 decoration slot upgrade, an additional tier 1 decoration slot, and another point in the Spirit Bird Core skill, which is kind of wasted unfortunately. But every build out there has various pros and cons. Even these endgame builds are not perfect. Whilst they are strong, they do still have flaws. When it comes to this Airborne dual blade build, its biggest pro is its damage output. Even though this build's damage could be potentially higher, it's still one of the biggest pros for this build, as we are able to bring down monsters quickly, especially if we're taking into account their elemental weaknesses. The other pro for this build is its survivability. Stun Resistance, Divine Blessing, Intrepid Heart will all keep us alive during a hunt, and prevent or reduce damage when we take to the skies to deal our more damaging combos. And the final pro for this build is it's an interchangeable build, as in it can use any element out there. All you have to do is switch out the weapon as well as the elemental jewels associated with that said weapon. But of course there are cons. The two biggest cons for this build is unfortunately there still may be times where you run into sharpness issues, especially if you're using weapons that only have a small amount of purple sharpness. You can ignore this if your weapon doesn't actually have purple sharpness, as most of the elemental dual blades that don't have purple sharpness have a huge chunk of white sharpness as well as a very high elemental rating. And the other con is, unfortunately, for a dual blade build, this build is lacking when it comes to stamina management skills. We don't have Marathon Runner, Constitution or anything like that, which could be potentially an issue for some of you. But regardless, this is still a very fun dual blade build to use, especially if you like the Airborne playstyle. Using Demon Flight, taking to the skies and performing the Heavenly Blade dance when you go down a monster's back is definitely a fun way to play. But it does run the risk, as after you've committed to the Demon Flight you can't get out of the way of a monster attack. Thus Divine Blessing, Stun Resistance, Intrepid Heart alleviates this issue, reducing potential damage taken or negating the damage knockback. As long as you're taking into account a monster's elemental weakness too, this build can bring down pretty much any monster you come across relatively fast, making this one of my favourite dual blade builds to use. But what are your thoughts? Please leave a comment down below, and until next time, I've been Darcblade, bringing you the Airborne dual blade build for Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. Hope you enjoyed the video, thanks for watching, subscribe and like for more.